Welcome back. Today I'm continuing the process to convert my 1981 DeLorean into an electric vehicle. On some previous episodes, you saw me build and mount the 3 battery boxes that we're using for the car. And in this episode, I'm going to be taking those battery boxes out, filling them with all of our battery modules, and getting them back installed in the car. To catch you up quickly, I'm taking the entire drivetrain out of a Chevy Bolt. The electric motor, the inverter, the charger, the batteries, the electronics, everything, and swapping them into the DeLorean. This is Project Lightning. So the first module that's coming out is the small battery module that fits here in the gas tank area of the car. So I have the battery loaded up. This is the small module that goes in the gas tank area, module number 5. And I'm going to show the wiring for this. So you can see that this is quite tight, so there's not a lot of room to spare in there. But there is a thing that says 5F, and then there's 5B. That is the front and back BMS connectors. And then on the side here, these are our main sort of battery terminals where the high power comes out of. And somehow I need to be able to connect this battery up to the other ones in series. And I'm going to do that using these. These here are called Anderson connectors. These are the big ones. These are 350 amps continuous rated. They peak at, I think, 500 amps or something like that. So they have a very high peak current. So for now, I'm just going to run it's 2-aught cable from each one of these into a connector. And I'm just going to set it on the top for right now. In the end, this is actually going to have a cover on top of it. And so these are going to mount to the top of that cover. And then I'm going to make a cable using another set of these. And this slides into here. If I could line it up. So it slides into there. And yeah, this is a big connection right there. I don't know how many inches that is, but it's quite large. I wanted to mount it on the side, but there's just not quite enough space with the mounting bracket in place. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do for now. Is I'm just going to set it on top. And then the BMS wires are going to connect to each one of these little pins right there. Now, on the BMS side of things, the BMS is going to be mounted right here on the back of this battery box. And so here is how it's currently mounted. This is the BMS right here. So it's got all of these large connectors, and each one of these goes to a battery module. This is currently held into here, which is just kind of retained using these little clips. However, because this thing is very light, this doesn't weigh hardly anything. And so I think I can just use some Velcro on the back and hold it in place that way, and that's even easier. So I've got laid out here some of the tools and pieces that I need to create a plug for this battery pack. What I've got is a couple cables. These are 2-aught welding wire, very thick cables. I've cut 2 of them, one red, one black. These are each about 14 inches long. The idea is I will be able to attach these to, well, you can't see it. I'll be able to attach them to the pack, and then the other side will go into here, and 2 of those gives me enough room to kind of move things around. On one side, this is the side that actually connects to the battery here, and it is a little copper end piece. And then on the other side, we've got here our Anderson 350 amp connectors, and those use a very large crimp connector as well. I'm going to be crimping this with 16-ton hydraulic crimper that I'll be using. So the first thing I need to do is take our wire and a cutter, and I'm going to remove the insulation from enough of this wire so that it will fit inside of the crimp connector. And then on the other side, it will be, this one's quite a bit smaller, so it will go like that. So that's up first. I've cut some pieces of heat shrink tubing here, which should go on just like that. And I color coordinated them, just, you know, for fun. So that was pretty quick and painless, honestly. So what I've got is a little cover piece here that I've got just to make sure that I don't accidentally short these pins that are open. I've got some actual cover pieces that are coming to replace this. I did make some custom little 3D printed caps to replace the other custom 3D printed caps that go over the entire thing. This way I can have these come out, and this is entirely protected now. So I don't really have to worry about like a piece of metal accidentally, like, the worst thing that can happen is a piece of metal touches both of these posts at the same time. Very bad things will happen there. So this prevents that from happening, and I can move stuff around and not really have to worry about it. Also got some cardboard. To make sure nothing drops in there. And that'll get installed shortly. I'm now starting the installation of battery modules into the rear pack. All right, so the small battery module here in the rear pack is all situated. There we go. And from the top here, you can actually see where the connector pieces are. So that's good. And those holes are pretty well aligned. So now I'm going to flip the box upright, and then I can start putting the other modules in it. I may do this connection first, these two connections. So they need to come out of here and wrap around and eventually hit the two modules that are on this far side. All right, so one thing I noticed is that I can't really get to the cap of this screw to the main post here. So I am going to notch this out just a little bit so I can get a socket around that. All right, so let's talk about my big challenge of today. My challenge is this wiring. This is the BMS wiring. This happens to be the for the rear pack. So this is all stock as it came from the Chevy Bolt. It basically, the stock car splits the pack into half. And so I'm essentially doing the same thing for my battery packs, and so it works out very well. All of these wires here go into the BMS. So I already know that I have to extend these because obviously the BMS is in the front of the car, not the back, as I've shown in a previous video. These little wires that come off here, each one of them, there's two that go to each battery module. And so this one is 6 forward, and then this one is 6 back. And so these would essentially plug in right there and right there. So the issue that I'm having here is the stock wire as it is. You can see that I've got one side plugged in here, and then now you have to use your imagination here, but there's going to be a battery module. There's 4 of them, and each one of them, they sit on these little pads. And so there's one here, 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 and here. And so this entire section is just going to be filled with battery. And the battery packs come out about this far. They essentially come basically even with this little front bar here, maybe a little bit behind it. And so right now this is fine, right? Because what I did was I notched out the frame here, and so I can put this here, and there we are, we're good. Except this, if I disconnect here and plug this guy in, plug that in there, then this cable is not long enough. And so basically it would get trapped under the battery module, which is sitting directly on top of it. So my first task, now that I've notched that today, is that I need to extend the first of these battery BMS sense lines. And they're very small, right? These are probably like 22 gauge or something like that, each one of them. So there's 5 of them in this little bundle. I need to extend those out 4 or 5 inches. It's not a significant extension, but I have to do it. And so I'm going to do that. And this is going to be exciting. All right, back in the shop. I've got my extension piece in there. And all of these little notches fit there just fine. I also did a full systems check using my multimeter there, and all of the voltages came out perfect. Of course, before I plugged it in, I made sure that there were no shorts, because that's really that's a big problem if you have a short between any of the pins. And so, yeah, now I can button this back up. Like so, except without this wire getting pinched. There we go. And then once I throw this all together, I'll be able to plug in the BMS. Before I put all of these things back together, the other thing I need to do is get my wires. There are my main battery terminal wires going. And then I'll never need to access this again, at least until I go and put the water cooling situation on there. So yeah, so I guess I will do the main battery connectors now. All right, so we've got our 2 main battery connections. They're coming out here. I've got them just like I put heat shrink all over the end of them. That way I don't accidentally short the battery. That's a good idea. Here we have the completed rear battery pack for the electric DeLorean. This is roughly half of the batteries that are going to go in, and you can see there's the final pack weight, 406 pounds, which is a little bit less than what the pack weighed in the Chevy Bolt that this came from. The total pack weight there was about 1,000 pounds, so if we double this, we get to about 800. That's where I'm making up some of the weight. You can see that our bus bars are not installed yet, and the BMS wiring is also not there. Here's the BMS wires, and this connects up to all these little orange places right there. I'm now starting the installation of battery modules into the front large pack. All right, a couple of days later, and I've now completed most of the electrical work on both of the battery packs. So on the front large battery pack, I've got the BMS wires here that are coming out of the front. These two BMS leads connect up to the small front battery pack that goes in the gas tank area. Once both of the front battery packs are in place, I will plug these in, and then these three connectors plug into the BMS, which also it sits on the same battery pack. On the top of the pack here is our main battery shutoff. And so I've got our connector here. Inside of this is a 400 amp fuse. And so this will slot into here and connect down. And then once it's engaged like that, then power would be live in the battery pack. For now, I'm going to leave this disconnected. The other two things that you see on here, you see that we've got a blue connector on this side and a red connector on this side. This blue Anderson connector here will connect up to the front battery pack. And so it's gonna have about, a 2 or 3 foot cable connecting this to the front pack. And then on the passenger side, this red plug over here connects up to the rear battery pack. So this is how the front pack connects to the rear pack. What I'll be connecting into this red connector here is this. This is 11 feet of 2-aught cable. And so this will connect the front battery packs to the rear battery packs. Moving over to the rear battery pack, the first thing you'll notice is we have the BMS wiring all completed. If you were able to join in on the live stream that I did, that's where I created the extension for our BMS leads. So there's an extension 8 feet long that connected for each one of these cables back to this bundle. And so this allows us to connect the BMS up that's in the front of the car to the rear battery pack. This will get wrapped at some point. Coming up on the passenger side of the rear battery box are these two wires here, and these wires connect to the small battery module that sits under the pack. So for right now, I've just got these heat shrinked so that they can't connect to anything, but I'll be cutting that when we move on to the next step. Then here on the driver's side of the rear battery pack, we have another Anderson connector. This Anderson connector is what connects us to the front battery pack. And then here in the rear, one of those connects to one of the battery modules. And then the other side is the pack negative, like the full battery pack negative right over here. The next step for the battery packs is to install these. These are the battery bus bars that connect from one module to the next. Just like almost everything else that I've done here on the channel, these I also sent over to Send Cut Send and had them cut them out of 3mm copper, and then they were bent into shape, and then I've wrapped them in heat shrink tubing. So that is the creation of our bus bars. I'm going to be using 5 of these to bridge the connections on the top of the pack, where I've already installed, I put some orange tape there just so that I knew that I was going to put them in the right spot. So right now, each one of the battery modules is just its own thing, and it's not electrically connected to any of the other modules, which means each one is about 35 volts or so. And 35 volts isn't really dangerous. You can touch both ends of the battery pack and you won't feel a thing because it's not a high enough voltage to bridge through your skin. However, once I start putting these on there, even just a single one between 2 battery modules means now we're up to 70 volts. Well, 70 volts is above that threshold where you really need to worry about the high voltage and you need to start using protective gear. So far it's been nice because I haven't had to wear protective gear for working on it, but that's about to change. Even without these bus bars in place, I still have to be protective about metal tools because each one of these modules can source like 1,000 amps or more. And so if you take a screwdriver or something like that and it bridges between 2 posts on a battery, it just welds it into place and could catch things on fire. It's very, very bad. Once I get these bus bars in place, that's when things get really dangerous. If I were to touch the ends when the voltage is, let's say, 200 or 300 volts, that's enough to bridge over your skin, and you will get a nasty shock that could potentially be life-threatening. And so you really need to avoid that. I am certainly going to do my best to avoid that. And so that's why I'm now switching over to using my protective gear. Here are the gloves that I am going to be wearing moving forward. Inside of here is a silicone glove, and that is rated for 1200 volts. And then on the outside, protecting the silicone gloves, is leather gloves. And so the idea is you wear these leather gloves on top of the silicone gloves. That way you get protection from electrical and also from anything that could potentially puncture the silicone. So that's why we do this. However, if you notice here, I have a lot more dexterity in this hand than I do the gloved hand. And so, yeah, so it's a challenge to install these bus bars. In particular, they use 10 millimeter nuts on everything. And so for some of that, I probably am going to have to go back and just use my hands to put the little safety covers on it. Otherwise, I will be using insulated tools as much as I possibly can. Now, once the bus bars are in place and I have our protective covers on them, I'm also going to install moving blankets over the top of each one just to protect from these chains here from accidentally shorting something out. And then we will move to install these in the car. So this is going to be the first time that the full battery packs with battery modules have been installed in the car. And so let's get to it. Almost immediately after attempting to put the bus bars in place, I ran into an issue. There is not enough room for me to get an insulated tool under the bus bar in order to put the nut into place. I switched to using a thin rubber glove on one hand to give me some protection against the roughly 100 volts that are present. Okay, with our two battery packs fully complete with bus bars installed, the only thing left to do is to get them in the car. So let's move them over. Take a look at that. Oh man, it is fantastic. The rear battery pack went in without a hitch. When I was timing it, and it literally took, I want to say, it was under 15 minutes. It was like 13 minutes or something like that. So yeah, fantastic. All bolted up, and this one's tightened down. So yep, good to go, all there. Then on the front, it is also in place here. I did run into a couple of clearance issues. The first one being where I put the little connector here. It's just like touching barely. So that will probably rattle because this is attached to the frame, the battery's attached to the frame, whereas this stuff is attached to the body, and so there'll be a little bit of flexing here. I don't think it really matters too much, but I will probably end up moving this slightly, just either forward or backwards or whatever. The other thing that I had not thought about at all until I got it in the car was that the hood, when it closes, that shutoff is just too tall. So when I went to shut the hood, I realized, oh, I can't shut the hood. This thing's in the way. So I will have to rethink that or come up with something else to do here. For now, this is fine. But obviously, when I do that first drive, I will need to close the hood. So I'll have to start thinking about that. Yeah, so the small battery box, the one that lives in the gas tank, is still yet to come, and I'm probably going to do that tomorrow. So that's all for tonight, and I will see you in just a second. All right, so the first attempt to get this up here, I've hit some challenges. So the first is I have an interference issue. So here's the main pack. This side here is the main pack, and then this is the small box here. And when I did test fitting, I didn't have the battery module in here, and so it hits. So I'm gonna shave that just a little bit, because I'm really close. I've got 3 of the bolts in, so like this is, this isn't holding it up. But I wanna make sure I get that 4th one in, and I can see the bolt hole right there, but it's just off just a tiny bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop this and shave this off just a little bit, just grind it down. And then the other thing I found is that I was trying to get the connectors, these are the BMS wires, into the small module, and it's almost impossible. It's really challenging to do it from the top, and you cannot do it from the side here because you can't look over and see where the connector is. So the other thing is I found I had broke this connector. I don't know when I broke this connector, but it's broken. So yeah, that must have happened while I was extending it somewhere. All the other connectors are fine, so hey, bad luck. Luckily, I do have a replacement connector for this one. I had bought it beforehand because initially I was going to extend each one of these wires rather than all at the other connector. So I've got these. I'm going to replace it. And then I'm going to make a small harness and use a 10-pin connector just for this guy. So then that connector will come up top, and I'll be able to just plug one connector in for the BMS, and then this will be all taken care of. And then at some point down the line, I will panel mount that or flange mount that so it's on the top of this. Yeah, so I mean, so far this is going pretty well. So yeah, let me take care of these and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So what I've done is I've added on a little Deutsch connector here. I thought I had a 10-pin, but I had to use a 12-pin, unfortunately. But hey, that's all connected there. I also ground this down just a little bit, just to give it a little recessed pocket. And then on the battery pack itself, I've got the BMS lines there, and then the corresponding Deutsch connector. Now, as I did say, at some point I would like to mount this like in here permanently some way, or down here or on the side or something, so that way I can have this sitting in here and have it all be watertight, or at least mostly. Anyway, so let's go ahead and throw that in the car now. Okay, that all went in perfectly. All of the bolts are in, if you can see that bolt there. I've also got the BMS wires. These are now all live, so all of these are connected to the right thing. The BMS is going to sit right on these Velcro strips right there. So that's fantastic. What else? Oh yeah, the main battery plug, this one right here. So this goes to this pack. So I've got it tied up right now just so I can access it easier in the future. Here's the final look at the packs installed in the car. And there you have it. All of the batteries are now installed in the DeLorean. Coming up on the next episode, I'm going to quickly throw together the 12-volt system, and we're going to get the motor spinning for the very first time. So if this seems like a fun project, you won't want to miss out on the next episode. So please show me that you're interested and give me your support by subscribing. This is Project Lightning.